Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Shaki?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Skomro?
Yes. This meeting will be recorded and it may be televised live. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you all please remain standing, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This past week, a matriarch of sort, Miss Rona Mail of Winthrop, passed away. Miss Bale was an amazing lady who was at one time a home economics teacher for the Winthrop Public Schools. When she retired, went on to be a nurse at the Don Orion, but all during that time was the chairperson of the Winthrop Scholarship Committee. Miss Bale's loss is a huge loss to Winthrop, to our children. I will tell you that I met Miss Bale 4 years ago when I became superintendent, and if you were at the funeral last week, they described her to a T. Miss Bale always had great tales to tell, and she will truly be missed. But I just wanted to just share that she was always there for our children, and I thank her for everything she did.
Mrs. Sharkey.
Yes. I also want to say that Rona also worked and volunteered at the Don Orion Nursing Home, where her daughter was a resident there for some years. She also loved her temple, and she was a devoted member and also serviced her temple to Farith, Israel. She also headed, as John said, the scholarship committee for the town of Winthrop, and she brought to us many of the scholarships that we have for our children today. She and Mel were devoted partners to each other, and they were also devoted to their children. Rona and Mel had 4 children, Craig, Norman, Owen, and a very special person in their life was their daughter, Jackie, who was a disabled young woman, but she was the center of her lives. She made sure that she was always the center of all of their lives, and she was loved dearly. Rona was also known to always look for those who were in need, and what was more important is she acted on it. She was a tough woman. She was very forthright, but she had a heart of gold. And that's what I remember her as, is a woman who had the heart of gold, who did for others as she would have liked to have done for other people. So to all of the family, I would like to give them our condolences and tell her how much she was loved by all of us.
Just a quick comment, if I could.
Please.
As president of the town council, Rona was on our scholarship committee, as John and Mary Alice both mentioned, and to be Rona true to form right up until 2 to 3 weeks ago, we were conversing on a regular basis about vacancies and who should go onto the committee, and sort of filtering out and going back and forth with questions on what's happening with the scholarship committee. She didn't give up till the end, and we really appreciate all the effort that she gave to the town of Winthrop and the schools over the years. Thank you.
If we could just have a moment for her, please. Thank you. Mrs. Superintendent, we don't have any visitors this evening, do we? Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Next is public comment. No public comment? The minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 20th?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Sullivan, second by President Gill. Any questions or comments about the minutes from October 20th? We shall vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Mrs. Sharkey abstains. Next is Mrs. Pearson.
Mr. Chairman, we have Ms. Pearson here from the William P. Gorman Fort Banks Elementary School who'd like to do a presentation on grade 3, past and current.
Okay, very good. First of all, thank you very much for having me. Tonight's presentation from me is going to be just a little bit different than maybe what you saw with Mrs. Bellistock and Mr. Harity, both of whom did really great presentations with a lot of detail in terms of MCAS scoring. Tonight what I'm going to do is just talk very briefly about our grade 3 students as they were last year. We're going to take a look at our current grade 3 students this year and how they're presenting. And then we'll spend an awful lot of time, not too much time, but the bulk of this presentation is really going to focus on what we plan on doing with the data that we have. So this is what the data shows, actually, really in its simplest form. Obviously, there is data that is much more detailed and has been given to the school committee and is available to the public on the DESE website. But this is the data in its simplest form, and I say that because it really doesn't give you too much of an indication as to how our students have scored in various areas. What you can see here, however, is these are the overall trends that we're noticing in our aggregate and then each of our subgroups. Really what stands out here is that our ELA students have made tremendous progress. I mean, very, very significant progress. Disappointing progress for some of the other two subgroups, and we seem to be holding our own with the aggregate. It's worth noting that you can make significant progress, just like you see with the ELL subgroup, and still not reach your CPI, because that's kind of like a moving target. The school committee, however, has gotten a very detailed packet, and in their packet, and this might not be so easy to see because I jammed so much information on it, but what you'll notice are there are 3 different data points, and the screenshot that you're looking at right now is the ELA aggregate scoring. The 3 data points in the top left have to do with the percentage gained or lost in each of the achievement levels. And then on the right-hand side on the top is the percentage of change over 2 years of MCAS data. And then finally, in the middle, you'll see that what I've done is I've given you a comparison for how we're scoring against the state. The school committee has received this not only for ELA like you're seeing here, and math like you're seeing here, they've also received it in each of the subgroup areas as well. So that was then, and this is now, and we're ready to start talking about our 3rd grade students. What I've given you here is a visual of the DORF. The DORF is the oral reading fluency. What you can see on this slide is that the incoming 3rd grade student performance, as well as the regression from spring of the 2nd grade into the fall of 3rd grade, is pretty comparable for the past 2 years. In the spring of 2014, there were 13 students that fell in the well below average category compared to 17 students in the fall. 20 students were in the below average in the spring compared to 28 in the fall, and 33 students fell into the bottom 2 categories in the spring compared to 45 in the fall. So there's definitely some regression as far as student performance is concerned as it goes from spring until the fall. We work so hard to try and minimize that, trying to encourage families to be active participants in keeping their student skills current. Sometimes families work with us, and sometimes they just fall a little bit short of that. Dr. Parker, who is the person who has been consulting with us and training us in RTI, tells us that ideally our goal is to get 80% of our students reading in the top 3 categories and 20% in the bottom 3. And of that 20% in the bottom 3, he says that our goal should really be 10% in the bottom 2 categories. As you can see, we're starting the year with 60% of our students in the top 3 categories and 40% of our students in the bottom 3 categories. We have 27% in the bottom 2 categories, so this suggests that we have some serious work ahead of us. I should mention, though, that the DORF is a very tricky instrument because what it doesn't do, it doesn't really help us isolate certain skill sets. So when you're looking at oral reading fluency, and not to get too technical, there are so many components of that particular measure. You have to be thinking about whether or not students are compromised in terms of their ability to recognize sight words, whether they're having problems with vowel teams, blending, and all of those sorts of things. So it's really up to the staff to help us drill down to what is attributable for these scores. For those students that are falling into the lowest category, we do continue to watch them, and we do something called progress monitoring. Progress monitoring is what we do to drill a little bit deeper to help us find out what those isolated skill sets are that could be contributing to these scores. But nevertheless, this is not atypical from what we've seen in years past. In addition to measuring students' oral reading fluency, we're also interested in taking a look at their comprehension. The third grade in the past has used the Scholastic Reading Inventory, and that is their measure of comprehension. This is the equivalent, if you take a look at this, the equivalent of below basic is warning, and basic is needs improvement. The data is also comparable, but slightly improved compared to trends over the past 2 years. So for instance, in the fall of 2013, we had 13% of our students that were scoring in the advanced category, and that was the equivalent to 19 students. 34% scored in the proficient category, and 36% scored in the basic, 17% scored in the below basic. This fall, we had 51% score in the advanced and proficient area, and 49% score in the below basic area. In the fall of 2013, we had 47% score in the advanced proficient and 53% score in the basic and below basic. For the below basic and the basic performing students, the reading count assessment is what we're using to monitor comprehension. So if you're looking at monitoring comprehension, the reading counts is basically the equivalent of the progress monitoring when we're taking a look at oral reading fluency. Now, if we take a look at the lowest performing students, both in comprehension and in reading fluency, we're talking about 54 students. Of these 54 students, 22 are considered low income, and of the 54, 16 are also receiving ELL services, and of those, 12 of them are on IEPs. And you think, well, that's drilling really deep. Why does it really matter? If you remember the beginning slides that I went to, I had shown you that we were flat, and in some cases not even flat, in terms of those two subgroups, the ELL and the free and reduced lunch, or the low-income students. So this is a really important piece of information because it helps us isolate those students that seem to be troubled more by both of these particular measures. We're optimistic that now that we have third grade there and we're looking at where the overlap is for the lowest scoring students in terms of oral reading and the lowest performing students in terms of comprehension, I'm optimistic that we've identified them early enough that we'll be able to make a pretty significant difference. So when you take a look at all the information that we've just gone over, and believe me, this is a very, very simplified version of what we've gone over as a staff, we've done the following. We've examined the trends in student performance, some of which I tried to allude to in just these quick slides. We took a look at an item analysis, which is something coming your way, to try and tease out the strengths and weaknesses in the student learning. And then we use that information to try and identify where the instructional approaches or the introduction of content needs to be revised. After that, we're establishing practices, programs, and supports to address the areas of need. This slide is an example of my approach to data analysis. What you're going to be able to find out is that those items that are not released really put us at a tremendous disadvantage. I just call your attention to a couple of those different strands and you'll see where they overlap. And then when you take a look at some of the information we're trying to tease out, although those strands overlap, when you try and figure out what is really the genesis for the student deficiencies, it gets very complicated. So let's take a look at a test question. In this sample test question, which is for the Reading Anchor Standard, where the topic is key ideas and details, you can see from the previous slide that we scored 7 points below the state. In parenthesis, you're going to be able to see the number of students that answered for each particular item. Really, only by analyzing the information can you really try and figure out what it is that the students were thinking about. So if you take a look at the question, which seems pretty simple on its face, you have to wonder what the root of that poor performance is, especially when you take a look at where the concentration of answers are. So as a staff, well, this is one that I did on my own, but I'll show you what the staff had done in just a couple of minutes when they were working with me and the DSAC team. They were wondering, the same as I was it a failure to notice key terms? Having the word first in bold, is that something that you just skip over? Was it their failure to analyze the text thoroughly? There was a picture on this. Was the picture too distracting? Or were they maybe not able to recall the chronological order? Those are the sorts of things that really help you understand why having that test item being released is so incredibly important. When you take a look at math, you're looking at the same thing with math. Look at the operations and algebraic thinking and take a look at measurement and data. And you'll see that we're going to be at a huge disadvantage when we don't have those released items in front of us. Taking a look at this item is the one that had me really puzzled. The students did so great. I mean, 75 students understood what the add for rule is and also recognized that it was a pattern. But then when we come down and we take a look at the next most popular answers, can't really figure out what they were thinking about when 10 chose that. For sure it's a pattern, but it clearly deviates from 4. So again, we have to worry, is it their failure to understand the term number pattern? Is it their failure to focus on the add for rule? Or are they just not reading critically and only focusing on the language that says pattern? Again, without having the test item in front of you, you can't even drill that deep to find out. So then, after I had done that, we also had the staff get together with the DSAT team. And I have to say that the staff collectively have done nothing but persevere over this data. And I feel incredibly fortunate that we are all in one building and take a look at some of the work that we've done around this. So here's an example of how the staff has teased out the strengths and weaknesses just in ELA. What I think is especially impressive is that not only are they making reference to specific test items, for instance, the ones that you see here are 16, 7, and 2, but they're also taking a look at the whole child, which really includes the strategies that they've acquired and the student learning habits that they've developed, or in some cases, I suppose, have not developed. If you take a look at some of those general areas of need, particularly down at the bottom, these are very real problems, and I'm sure that our parents are seeing it at home as well. Are the students looking back at the text? Are they using the subtitles? Do they understand those text features? Or are they simply giving up and feeling like they've kind of had enough? And so perseverance and motivation. It's tough to say, but again, having the teachers work with us to examine this at every grade level makes all the difference in the world. This is very comparable to what had happened with ELA, only in terms of math. And again, you'll be able to see that in addition to taking a look at the questions, they've also taken a look at the profiles of our students. The teachers are very quick to recognize that there are some other general areas of need, which would be the easy fix on things. For instance, teaching geometry a little bit later in the year than what we ought to be doing, so we're going to take another look at that. The vocabulary needs is something else that we need to take a look at. And then just general strategy development, making sure that students are reading the questions carefully, really analyzing it, thinking about using representational thinking as they're analyzing answers. So the teachers have done a great job in helping us to figure out what some of these traits that the students might be missing are. So after we have all of that information, there are 3 things we're going to do in terms of folding them into our practice. We are going to establish collective ownership of student performance on MCAS, and you're going to have some great examples of that tonight. We're going to align our practices so that they're common and meaningful to all staff. I can tell you that in the past, the practices that have been going on between the 2nd and 3rd grade, for instance, are different. It's not that either of them are wrong, they just haven't been aligned. And to make sure that we have a trajectory for student forecast and learning, aligning those practices is super important. And then providing support that is targeted and focused on staff and students is also very important. So I'd like to say, and I think that you're going to agree shortly, that our approach is a reflection on a very dedicated and hardworking staff. Let's take a look at those goals that we have under collective ownership first. We have a lot of team-based goals that are going on here. I gave you an example of some of these, talking about raising the student achievement in terms of ELA and writing. We have several team goals that are associated around that. And again, those transcend grade levels, so that for sure is an example of collective ownership. We've also established a writing curriculum development committee. The goal behind that committee is to be able to work in vertical teaming efforts to make sure that we can identify and isolate what it is that students need to really hone in on and what teachers need to be able to have happen in order for them to be able to track and measure student success. And then the last one is to continue to do what we have done in the past, which I think is a new program for third grade, but it's what we call the Walk to Learn model. This is one that takes a little bit of getting used to. The students seem to be getting used to it, and I think that the parents might be on board as well. In order for us to be able to capitalize on the instruction and the limited staff that we have, what we do is we have a willingness to blur grade level lines. And so what we do is we take a look at those basic skill sets that students have, and just depending on their needs, according to those skill sets, they will participate to where those skills are being honed in on, regardless of where the grade level might be. This is an especially important program for our ELL students that may have an easier time accessing the curriculum at a completely different grade level. So this is a really important one. But the ultimate of collective ownership has to do with the example that I've given you here. So this is one that the school committee has gotten probably more pages than they ever wanted to receive on it. What we've done is I had isolated 4 different areas between ELA, which is English Language Arts, writing, and math. And within each of those areas, what I've done is I've targeted different areas that we need to focus in each of the grade levels. The thing about this that I find to be especially appealing, and I'll be sharing this at a staff meeting tomorrow. The teachers have seen this at a staff meeting, but they haven't gotten it in a level of detail that it is put out in front of you here. What's especially attractive about this is this doesn't rely on any new curriculum programs, so it's of no cost to the district. It doesn't rely on any new instructional programs. The example that I would give you in instructional programs, for instance, might be RTI, something that has training involved with it. This is just really taking a look at what is it that we need to do from one grade level to another that's going to shore up those skills and get students performing in a higher area. So if you were to take a look at this area here, what we're talking about, you can see that if we start in kindergarten, focusing students on paying a little bit more attention to inflections and affixes and prefixes and suffixes and synonyms and antonyms, and not in a kill and drill way, but just increasing their conscience towards those terms. And then we take them up to the next grade level where we think about multiple meaning words and what those might, they're obviously very finite in first grade, but in first grade we might be talking about just shades of meaning. What it means when we use EST at the end of a word. What it means when we use ER at the end of the word, and how does that change? And by the time we get into second grade, we can do a little bit more ambitious work when we talk about what prefixes change word meanings and in what fashion. And by the time we get into third grade, we can then begin to really drill deep and talk about comparative language, and language, specifically words that have multiple meanings. The next area is one that I've called added value support. The added value support is really our approach at targeting very specific needs. This year, the first thing that we did is we were fortunate enough, because of the generosity of the school committee and the superintendent, to have an additional specialist that was assigned to us. Initially, there was some talk about a library media specialist, and I asked and was given an opportunity to develop an academic support block. And so what this academic specialist does is she goes into every first, second, and third grade classroom once a week, and she targets support based on the content need of a particular grade level. This person does not go in with an idea of shoring up the content in one particular classroom, because that's only going to create a bigger chasm between classrooms. So during our common planning time, the teachers are meeting collectively. They are isolating a specific skill set that needs to be worked on in a particular grade, and the academic support specialist goes in and provides that support to our students. We also have retooled the use of our occupational therapists, who are very specialized in developing writing approaches and strategies, including fine motor skill sets. And so the OT folks are now going into the classroom in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, with the exception of just a couple of those classes where we might have inclusion classrooms, and because we had to economize for the sake of scheduling and time. And they go in and they do a writing block, very similar to what I just described for the academic support block. The difference is that the focus is really on fine motor and topic development. We also have a last period curriculum enhanced by technology block. And so what that means is that for those few blocks, and I believe they are 3 times a week, where Mrs. Sullivan's schedule is free and she can provide in-class support, The computer lab is available for any teacher who wants to take her class down to do whatever it is that they might be able to benefit from having technology available. For some folks, it has to do with writing assignments and polishing up their writing. For other folks, it might be having different sorts of math programs be available. Math programs where students can, for instance, practice their math fluency in timed measures are good for some of our students. They're not so good for other students. And so being able to personalize your learning in a technology-based environment is helpful. We also have 12 hours a week of math tutorial support. That's provided by 2 recently retired teachers in our school. What I really like about this particular added value support block is that it provides supplemental instruction for both our highest and lowest achieving math students. And then we also have the additional supplemental technology, which is something that is available to students and to parents, constantly taking a look at our school website and putting other programs on there that students can practice at home. The last area of our approach is focused on aligning practices. And this particular action step is probably the obvious glitch in our past practice. For example, revisions to the comprehension assessment. The comprehension assessment that we had used in the past was called the Maze instrument. There are huge differences between the Maze instrument that was administered in 2nd grade as compared to what is being used as far as SRI is concerned in 3rd grade. In the Maze, for example, it's administered 3 times a year, just like SRI, but it's administered collectively, meaning to a whole class, whereas SRI is administered individually. Another huge difference is that SRI, 3rd grade practice, is it establishes a ceiling. So in other words, students continue to persevere with this test until a ceiling is established. We don't have that on the Maze. So aligning these assessments, as I said previously, is going to help us track the student growth over time. And for sure, I think that we're just about all on board in understanding that SRI is a far more effective measure than what the 2nd grade had been using as far as the Maze is concerned. In addition, we had also found out that the math data analysis that had been going on in 3rd grade wasn't really as standardized as the one that we're using in our school. In our school, we've been routinely using Go Math for our data analysis for all grade levels. So we administer the Go Math chapter assessments monthly. Mrs. Sullivan scores them, and the assessment that we've chosen on Go Math is one that also helps us take a look at open response and multiple choice. As I understand it, that's something that's a little bit different, and so 3rd grade team now is getting on board with that, and they have selected the Go Math chapter assessment that will be processed in exactly the same way. Just to give you an example of what we do with that, you go down to the next bullet, and you see that we have Mrs. Sullivan who is tagging the Go Math chapters tests for us. So that data comes down to Mrs. Sullivan, and she tries to chunk that data into something meaningful as it relates to the Common Core. I can give you an example of data that was given last week. Just last week, the grade 1, all of the incorrect answers on the grade 1 Go Math chapter assessments focused on operations and algebraic thinking. Taking a look at the questions, it was all representation involving addition and subtraction. So it'll be pretty helpful to get us all on the same page with that. And then there are those really important teachers, and that has to do with the families. And to be honest, that's a bit of a struggle for us because parent involvement, although we do have the steady eddies that come and volunteer, getting new families into the volunteering in our school and finding them to be visiting our websites isn't really as robust as we would like. And this is how parents and guardians can help. If they could support teachers with the level of expectation for student learning, basically, the students will hear me say this, and I know the staff has, and a variety of parents. Don't be a minimalist. Mm-hmm. Put everything you have into the assignment. It's not a matter of just getting it done and sending it in. It's really digging deep. Encouraging folks to visit the Classroom School Fusion pages. School Fusion pages are a great vehicle for understanding what the expectations are for student learning and where some of the assignments are going to be posted. In fact, many School Fusion pages also include tips and strategies for learning. The online resources that I previously made reference to Our school website is a wonderful resource for information for families in terms of learning, and also some games that students can access that will keep them engaged and motivated. Asking questions of both me and the teachers, improving attendance and decreasing tardiness. You would be surprised at the number of families that really feel kindergarten, first, second, third grade, it's okay, this is just a fine time of their life to take students out on vacations. Not so much. Truly, every single minute of our day is allocated for something meaningful. Emphasizing the importance of school and attending school events. You vote with your feet, so to speak, and so when families attend our school events in a very subliminal way, it does send a very strong message to our students. Attending PTO meetings so that you can hear updates, and of course volunteering. And I think the news is good. I do. I really feel that having third grade there, having the energy and the professionalism of the staff that we have are going to make very good things happen. And I think that maybe Winthrop is just turning a corner in this. And this is what we've been talking about for a long time. We've been talking about this disconnect between second and third grade. And that's one piece of it, for sure. But the other piece of it is, how do you establish collective ownership of anything that you don't see? It's difficult to do that. So tomorrow's Professional Development Day will be a very important one for us, and we've actually already had one that has brought the staff together. We have never had as much vertical teaming in our school as we have now. And all of that is with an eye towards assuming ownership for every single component of our students' achievement. It isn't just about MCAS. That's not the only motivation. But it's understanding that there are skills that we're all responsible for, and building on those skills calls for really taking ownership of the students that you have at the time that you have them, and understanding the import of making sure that they're on solid footing so we can take them to the next and highest level.
Thank you,
And that's
Mrs.
it.
Pearson.
I'm sure that this was a breath of fresh air compared to what I gave you in your packets.
Do we have questions for Mrs. Pearson?
I just make some
Mrs.
comments. I wholeheartedly agree with Eileen when she comes up with the one point about the disconnect between the second and the third grade, as far as being able to meet together and to discern what is needed, how the assessments look, what the whole entire battery that needs to be done so we can continue to connect with each other because we're in different buildings. The same thing exists between the 5th and the 6th grade when, it was 6, 7, 8 in the middle school. I think something, and maybe it's just things that I've heard, that I think shows the positiveness of being able to bring together grade levels is now that the 8th grade is here with the high school students, so it's now 8 through 12. I think that I've heard that many of the 8th and 9th grade teachers are saying, oh, that's what you do. Okay, well, maybe we can work this together and be able to figure out what we do and don't do so that we can cover each other's bases for the kids so that we can present the material that either they already know, so therefore we don't need to do as much on it, or that those that they don't know, so that that's where we need to concentrate between the grades. And I think that's such an important thing. But also with that is common planning time. And I think that's the one area that we are so weak in all of our buildings is the common planning time, though it has increased significantly over the last few years. But that's with really the ingenious way that I think our principals and our teachers have been able to manipulate the time factor. But we still need so much more time. And a question, Eileen, I guess. I know this is the last year, if I'm not right, for Go Math, that we have to redo.
It's the last free year.
Last free year, right.
Because it was a 5-year
Oh,
bundle.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought this was the,
When we purchased it on a 5-year packet.
okay.
So it's the 5th year, and
This
so
is the
now.
last year,
we-
right
if we
now,
wanna
for
continue,
this.
Right. If we would like to continue with Go Math, then we need to
assess.
budget for it.
Budget for it. And I guess that's what I'm asking you, Eileen. knowing what you know, you've worked with Go Math from the time it was introduced to our school system. Do you feel that Go Math is the best math program for our students? Or is it time to look at and review another, or is that too soon to even think of that?
Well, I don't think the answer is all that simple. Because the fact of the matter is that when you look at that consolidation that I had shown you, I think it was on the third grade,
Yeah.
on the third slide, the one content area where we kind of nudged up just a little bit was in math,
Okay.
regardless of what that subgroup
Right,
was.
right.
And we were flat
It was.
in
I
ELA.
did see that, yeah.
That's one component. The other one is Go Math is aligned to the Common Core. At the time that we selected Go Math, there were not that many programs that were, and there are clearly more of them now. But we have parents that have tried to get up to speed. We have students that have tried to get up to speed. And so I think what we need to do is to really have faith in our staff to help us make that decision. I think that it would be presumptuous and heavy-handed for any administrator to make that choice. And I think it would be disrespectful to the staff. There are pros and cons to every curriculum program. And we also understand that these things evolve over time. The biggest consideration right now is that to continue on with Go Math is going to have some serious financial implications, as would selecting a new program. But there are other considerations that could make that even more of a financial burden for the district. There's training that has to happen. There's an abandonment of certain materials that would have to happen. So I think that if the district has a curriculum committee that might want to take a look at this, that would probably be the right first step.
Okay.
I do want to just, if it's okay, I just want to speak to one thing that you had mentioned, and that has to do with bringing the staff together. And I think that is one important piece, for sure. But I think it also is one of three really important pieces. By having folks in the same building, not only do you have staff that are there together, but you have an opportunity for teachers to be able to really appreciate one another's pedagogy. We all have different ways of delivering instruction, and any time that we can standardize those ways, we create predictable learning environments and predictable thinking habits for students. So that's something else that's going to be afforded. The interpretation of assessments is something else that is afforded by being in the same schools. So it's not just having teachers there to be able to dialogue about. And as importantly as that, it's the interpretation of that data, that we can actually sit around a table and try and tease out what these issues are. You had mentioned that, we have the same sort of a split, or we had the same sort of a split between 5th and 6th grade. I'm not saying that there's any one year where it's best. I would just bring one thing to your consideration. When you're in the early elementary, those are foundational skills. Very, very different than when you're getting into the upper grades, where you're basically refining taught material. Obviously, you're adding on to it. But those foundational skills, teaching students how to analyze a problem, how to think about things, how to immediately default to representational thinking, that means that if you have a word problem of some sort, that you're either going to know to default to a graphic organizer that works for a persuasive piece or an expository piece, or if you have a math problem, to understand how using certain blocks they're going to represent certain groups of numbers. Those are difficult sorts of things to teach to students that already have those habits of mind really embedded in them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
So for the younger grades, I think our call to action is a little bit different, and I think that really matters. I should also mention, though, that several staff have asked about what the district is going to do in terms of Go Math and moving forward.
Yeah.
And because the district has purchased it in K-5, I think it really warrants a bigger conversation than this talking head.
Okay, especially during a curriculum meeting, which is vital, so that,
Yeah.
and as I'm sure John will mention about, bringing on a
One of the
potential-
first steps we're going to do, take a
Yeah.
look right at that.
Right, a curriculum coordinator
Right.
that we have nodded to. I'm hoping that will start gelling us together, pulling us together, and being able to bring all the pieces together. Sometimes I think we're leaning too much on a person to do all of the work, and now hopefully we have a team of teachers in each building on a curriculum team. And then we have our principals, vice principals, and hopefully we'll now have a person that is the go-to person that will be able to evolve the things that we need for our children to learn.
For sure, and the dialogue should be much easier this time around. Remember, when we were selecting Go Math, and a survey had been sent out, there were 14 different math programs that were being used, at least in some fashion, at the elementary level.
Yes,
you know?
there was.
So,
yes.
boy, what a difference 5 years makes, right? So
Yeah.
now we can have a conversation about choosing a math program with us all having the same baseline understanding of what it is that potentially we would abandon. So that's different.
If I may, and then I'll stop.
So will I.
Would it be possible I know it'd be possible, advantageous to kind of get a little bit of a survey with our K through 5 teachers on how they feel about the Go Math, and also something that they may have heard that for us to look at, so that we're not just randomly going out there.
Right.
That
I
we
think
can
that-
zero in on.
I think that would be a prudent thing. I mean, obviously, I would want to talk to Mr. Harity about it, but I can't imagine that there would be any other approach that's going to make better sense than that.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to answer to her question, to Ms. Sharkey's question. That will be one of the transition that we will do with the new curriculum director
Okay.
coming on board, is that we're going to be taking a look at all of the programs, but primarily the Go Math and the math program itself. So we will be touch base with K through 5. And as a matter of fact, right now, we've been piloting it in grade 6 and 7 this year under Mr. Harity's tutelage of getting that out there, because we're taking a look at it, so.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to mention one other thing to that point, that you don't want any of these considerations to happen in a vacuum, right? So it's going to make good sense for the committee to contemplate where we're going to stand in terms of park,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
You know, all those
Yep.
kinds of things.
Yep.
Because the depth of coverage of the program that you select is really important.
Absolutely. But if,
Mr. Sharkey, we're going to let
Okay.
some other folks take a turn,
Okay.
including myself. We can get back to you. There's much talk about a disconnect between 2nd and 3rd grade, 5th and 6th grade, caused by children being in different buildings. But surely that doesn't put us at a disadvantage in the Commonwealth. There must be very few places that have all of their students in one building. And just because you're in one building doesn't mean you're communicating properly from one grade to the other. And just because you're in different buildings doesn't mean you're not communicating properly between the grades. Isn't it our responsibility to make sure that there isn't a disconnect between buildings? And hopefully that's what's going to happen, at least somewhat tomorrow?
So, I don't know, Mr. Scomro, I think there's a big difference between theory and practice, right? And so, in theory, we'd like to think that there is no disconnect, but we know that in practice, that is the reality of the situation. We have very limited common planning time. Our professional development days, by and large, are half days, and so there are logistical considerations around that. There are a lot of schools in the Commonwealth that are K-8 schools, and I don't think that it's just by happenstance. I think that when you think about reconfiguring schools, for sure, you're going to have grade levels that are going to be clustered in one building as opposed to another building. But is the 2-3 the easiest one to separate? You know, having a pre-K to 2 and then a 3 and so on. You know, that's anybody's guess. I think that if it was a district that had a different sort of profile, say for instance districts that have early release days every single Wednesday, so you could make that sort of thing happen, it may be less of an obstacle for us. But we'll find that out, won't we? Right? Having 3rd grade here, we'll see what that difference is going to be.
Only
But
for
for
2
sure.
years.
Huh?
Only for 2 years.
Let's take 1 year at a time and see what happens. In the meantime, you know, I'm comfortable to speak on behalf of the staff in this regard. The dialogue and the focus that we've had on student learning and the trajectory for our forecast is significantly different this year than it has ever been, for sure at our school. And I'd have to say that the 3rd grade teachers would probably say the same.
Thank you for your presentation. Certainly very thorough, as I'm sure we all expected it to be. I have been mindful about thinking about how much time administrators and teachers are spending on analysis of data and other things besides teaching in the classroom. So when you're talking about the multiple choice analysis and the most popular wrong answer and so forth, are you doing that all analysis by hand, or is there a computer program that would help you analyze that faster with less manpower?
So thanks for asking. The department does have on their website, they do a data analysis in some ways for you. So in other words, they'll show you where your score deviates from the state, and they'll show you by how much deviates, by the way, in both directions. There were some that we completely rocked. You know, we were 11 points above the state. So I just want to make sure that we're also highlighting the positive. And so the data that they give you does identify that for you, and it also identifies the strands. It does give you some indication as to what the issues could be, but not as deep as we go forward here, because they don't know the curriculum I'm using. They don't know the areas of weakness that I might be seeing when I'm doing classroom observations. And I think that this is the labor of love. This is, you know, you just go crazy over it for 2 weeks, and you take it out there to the staff, and they appreciate an opportunity to dissect the information and kind of reflect on what it is that they have to do to hammer things home. And it's arduous, but they're using it. I mean, in so many ways, I felt incredibly frustrated by all the initiatives from the department. And in all honesty, I'm starting to see them coming together. It was this data analysis that we wound up doing with the DSAC team, where we were all teasing out the test items. That's what got the teachers to adopt those collective teacher goals. That's huge. Collective teacher goals, that's not a shot in the arm. That's an entire grade level saying, I think we get it. We can make a difference here. Let's make this difference together. And then we have all these other vertical opportunities, like the writing committee and, you know, a variety of other things like that. So, you know, I appreciate you being sensitive to how long it takes, because it's enough to make you crazy. But it's worth it.
I just want to be sure there wasn't another computer program that we could make available to you to, you know, do additional analysis that you're looking for.
If there is, honestly, Mrs. Sullivan, if there is, I'm probably just not familiar with it yet, because I'm so new at analyzing this data. And, you know, among the many personal flaws I have, one of them is my inability to delegate. I was going to turn that into a professional practice goal for the superintendent, but I'm going to get to that one in another year.
If I can just, the Department of Ed is working very closely on linking all of us to have the same data that we're able to go into with the student information systems and the Edwin, so that we can all pull up everything that we need for students, whether they're here or not. So that's happening as we speak.
I do think it's critical, though, to get to the root of the problem and the root of the, you know, what's missing in the classroom, or what are the students missing in the teaching. So,
well, it is, because, you know, I'm super
priceless.
concerned about that subgroup performance. And in order for me to figure out how we're going to tackle the needs of the subgroups, I've got to take a look at those test questions. No matter how deep the department goes on that, no matter how deep they drill or what they make available, they don't know the profile of this community. They don't know what services we have available. For instance, the committee and the superintendent gave me 2 full-time ELL teachers. Did you see our ELL scores?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't think that increase of 25 points just happened.
Mm-hmm.
You have to believe it's got something to do with resources. So where we don't have those resources and those approaches that we've targeted for our low-income students, it makes good sense for us to sit back, take a look at some of these questions, and see, are we talking about vocabulary here? Are we talking about a lack of environmental print? You know, I mean, how far back do we have to go? So we'll keep looking at it, but we'll definitely keep hoping that the department is going to give us something a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I think this Edwin Analytics, you know, as I'm beginning to understand it and what they're having available, it seems like they're constantly bringing more to the table in terms of the menu of options for analyzing data. So I'm sure that it's there.
Thank you.
Get Mr. Harity to teach me how to do it.
Mrs. Pearson, I appreciate all of the work that you do, but I know that one of the greatest factors that you struggle with, that we all struggle with, is parent involvement. And I know that when I was at your school, when my children were at your school, I went to 2 instructions for parents on understanding Go Math. This was when it was first introduced. And in classes where there was clearly more than 100 students in a class, you would have 11 parents in the room to learn about Go Math. Now, I went to 2 of those, and I still struggle with Go Math. So I can only imagine what the parents who didn't go to them. I think Meredith Caffell, Meredith Condon, and Andrea O'Leary were my teachers for Go Math. There's none better, but I struggle. And if I wasn't there, if I wasn't involved, it would be even more difficult for my children and for me. The answer to that question, I just don't know. How to get parents in the building. I don't know. I think it's an incredibly important piece, though.
I think it's the one that everybody struggles with. We were at a conference with the superintendent just last week, and it's always at the forefront of conversation. You know, and it's disappointing and it's frustrating. You know, you can say, well, it has to do with the transient population. You can say it has to do with our ELL numbers. You can say it's just a busy time of year. I mean, really, we've thought about that in a million different ways and just can't seem to wrap my head around it.
Well,
It's very
you
disappointing.
can make as many reasons or excuses, but the fact is, they're my children, and I need to know what's going on in their school.
Spread the word. Even the school fusion pages. I mean, start with that. You can do it on your couch. It's tough, very frustrating.
Any other questions for Mrs. Pearson? Thank you very much.
Great
Okay, well,
presentation.
thank you for
Thank you,
having
Ms.
me.
Pearson.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me swipe that. All right. Yeah, very indulgent, thank you.
I will say,
That's because it's my
Do it
first
again.
year with
Do it
MCAS,
again.
right?
first person to get an applause. Sorry, Mr. Harity, you got an applause.
He started it. He started it. Here's collegiality, right?
There you go. Just means you better applaud for him next time.
I gave him a standing ovation. They didn't put the camera on me.
The next item on the agenda are the subcommittee reports. Mrs. Sharkey, would you like to talk about the Shore Collaborative?
Yes. I'm sorry that I wasn't here last time, but on the Shore Collaborative report, what was discussed was they had recently had an audit that came into the building for numerous days, assessing the programs, assessing the schools, assessing the advancement of our children who attend Shore Collaborative. I can only tell you that Shore Collaborative obtained the highest level of scores that I believe any of the other Shore programs or scored. They were very pleased with what was presented to the children. They were very pleased to see the action of what the teachers were and interacted with the kids. They got exceptional scores. And I'm just very proud that I've gotten to know these people who give these services and provide the great amount of work that is provided for these children, who are children who are in need for whatever reason, whether it's emotional, physical, or whether it's behavioral. They're there for a purpose and they're there for a reason, and these people work for these children very well, and that got great scores. And again, which I know you already did, they had mentioned about the changes in the contract that was presented to the school committees, all the school committees of all the different locations. And I had said to them that, you know, we would be pretty sure that we would be signing off, which I understand that we did. And the other piece is that the Shore has now obtained another piece of property. And what they're trying to do is expand potentially on an alternative program, maybe more on adult education. So they have definitely confirmed and agreed with the owners of a piece of property in believe it's, I'm going to say Everett, but it could be Medford also. And that will come to fruition in the next year or two. So that's a really, really positive thing. And it was a good report, and it was good to see everybody because I hadn't seen them since last spring. So it was good.
Thank you, Mrs. Sharkey. Mr. Superintendent, do you have a report this
I
evening?
do. I have a few items I'd just like to go over briefly with. First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Pearson and the William P. Gorman Fort Bank staff for putting together a wonderful report. As you know, for the last 3 sessions, we've talked about the high school, the middle school, middle school Cummings, as well as the William P. Gorman. And at one of our upcoming meetings, I am going to ask the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction for the 5 district partnerships to come and do a presentation on what we're doing as a 5DP. So we'll be news to come later, as we say, coming attractions. Few things that have been going on in the school right now, as this year our grade 4 was selected to do the NAEP exams. That's the national exam for math, and that will be happening this February for our 4th grade students. That information will be going home, but I know that we get randomly selected by the government, and so it's not, so that'll be one of those that we do. And that test is the national exam that gets placed out there amongst all the states and also through the country, through the international. And a lot of times when you see results in the country that say Massachusetts is #1 in math and sciences in grade 4, or they're tied for first, or internationally they could be second in the world by themselves, but then in the state. And so this is how they get those results. The parents, will never get those results. Those are just, these exams are taken here, and then they're collected as data, and they talk about how the different states did. And so we will be, this year, and I believe, I have to double check, I don't have Ms. Bellistock here, but I believe 8th grade is also involved as well, but I do know our 4th grade is. Moving on to exciting stuff that has been happening on the extracurriculum. As you know, that our sports teams have always seemed to be doing extraordinarily well. Last Friday night, the first playoff game for football, the Winthrop Vikings prevailed. They beat the Hamilton Wenham Generals, I think it was 26-6. They will play this Friday night again at home against Triton, and as long as they win, they keep playing home. Our girls' soccer team today went and played the #1 seed, and they won 8-0. So that, to me, in the soccer world, I would imagine an 8-0 score is probably a 45-0 score in football.
Just about.
Yes. So they are waiting the winner of tonight. They think it may be St. Mary's that they'll go up against next. And currently, the reason you hear the phone buzzing is because we're down 2-1 right now in volleyball in the second round, but haven't gotten any update yet. That is where Mr. Holden is tonight. He's with his daughter, who's on the volleyball team. They're playing Mystic Valley. They won their first match last week, where they took out one of the top-ranked teams. So Winthrop girls and boys are progressing along very nicely in the sports world. It is an amazing accomplishment for what you believe that they've also gone through, where this is kind of like this home isn't their home, and yet they've been able to still not let that interfere. So I applaud the coaches of all the sports, as well as our students, and look forward to much more success.
Mr. Superintendent, if I could
Yes.
say, for those folks looking on the map to try to find Triton,
Yes.
it doesn't exist. It's 3 school districts.
Yes.
That is correct.
Tri-town.
But the good news is we don't have to find them. They have to find us.
Yes.
So they have to come to Winthrop, and we're pleased about that. Because the last place I wanted to go to on Friday night on Halloween was to go to Hamilton Wenham. But they came down here. And speaking of Halloween, actually I was debating whether or not we should have the game that evening or how it works. It actually worked out very well. It worked out nice to have the game. It seemed like there was, not too many issues out there, and things worked out well. The Scholarship, I wanted to just give you a brief scholarship update, because I know many people have asked since our last meetings and when I've talked about. The current town scholarship committee has met twice, and we will be meeting again in November, on November 18th. And at that particular meeting, we will be meeting with the executives of the Paul and Norma Fasella will. And so we will, the word in their conversation with us now, they're working very hard to make sure that we will have monies for this year's graduating seniors. What that amount is yet, we are not sure. We're not told yet on how that's going to work, but we will be meeting with them. As a matter of fact, when Mr. Gill had talked about it earlier, I did not realize until the other day, but I was, one of the last emails, conversations that I had was with Miss Mayo on Tuesday evening, last evening, when she had emailed me saying, could you reschedule that meeting because I have to go back to the doctors that day, so we were taking a look at that. But, so we have two new members on the committee, on the scholarship committee. Mr. Fabiano has joined us, and Miss second grade teacher, why can't I think of her name?
Hanlon.
Judy Hamlin has joined us as well on the committee, and so we are putting together a really good criteria that we believe will be fair and equitable to all students in this, and so that's what we're currently working on now. Just received the update that we did.
John Dowd is on there as an associate member as well.
Yes, Jack Dowd, that's correct. So, just a couple of other items I wanted to go through on this. The Cummings last week did an anti-bullying committee. They composed of teachers, students, and adjustment counselors. They planned a week of anti-bullying activities, which was held last week. It built a positive school culture around being an upstander, not a bystander, and that was important, and I salute them. We had Jackie Lamont from the district attorney's office. She came back and spoke to all our 4th and 5th grade students, and it was an excellent, excellent program. It was all on internet awareness. The Winthrop Police sponsored a trip to Spectacle Island last week, where our students with Mr. Herity, they attended, and it was a great trip. And let's see, on that, at the William P. Gorman School, I did notice on my sheet here that they've begun their Fun at the Fort program, and they've had the highest enrollment ever.
Wow.
So 67 students attended, and 71 on Wednesdays and 71 on Thursdays. So that's a heck of an accomplishment there. Also in your packet, you'll notice that you received a thank you letter from Mr. Sherwin and the ATC band, and they gave you a nice picture, and it was thank you to the Winthrop School Committee. We wanted to say thank you for the money you gifted us to buy music stands. You can see that these stands are already hard at work, and you will be seeing them very soon at our concerts. Thank you so much.
Mr. Superintendent, I'm sorry, it didn't come through in our packet, but on the other side, there was the signatures that from the students thanking us.
So as you see, all of the kids, they wrote down, they have nice special thank yous on that, and so just, it's important that you realize that these decisions that you do make a difference. And so we were pleased with that. Talked about Fun at Fort scholarships update. Tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday, I'll be attending the Massachusetts Superintendent / School Committee workshops down in Hyannis. It's the annual trip down to Hyannis. If any of you would like to participate, there's still time. You could come down. Love to have you down there. But there's going to be a lot of discussion this year. They're going to be talking a lot about PARC and MCAS. Also, discipline, the new discipline law that's coming down, as well as now they're writing new regs on restraint training and restraint itself. One of the new changes on restraint is that in the past, there's going to be a particular way, if you put a child into timeout, they cannot be in timeout now for no longer than 30 minutes. And then the other big change that will be coming down on restraint is that when a student is restrained, Normally, or as it's currently written now, is that you have to submit a report after it's been 20 minutes or longer. Now, you will submit a report no matter how long it is. And so those are one of the areas that are coming. So there'll be a lot of good discussions that'll be down there and good talks. I'm ready to move on to I know what I wanted to just bring you. One other update was with the school building. As you see, if you go by the school now, you actually see concrete. So the foundation is being poured. Mr. Gerard and I did a walkthrough on Friday. We were up there, and they are going right around the whole building first, and then they will start to go in and connect all of the rebar and the concrete at that point. It's pretty exciting to see what is happening over there. But I did want to also just inform everybody that at the last School Building Assistance Committee meeting, under the motion by Mr. Lettieri, the School Building Committee, under the swing space, has purchased 2 more sets of Chromebooks for the Arthur T. Cummings School because they felt that in the transition with the computer room being taken out as a classroom and then the library being the computer room but being utilized continuously, and as well as the great progress that's been happening with the online support that we've been doing with students, that the 60 Chromebooks that we had were not enough. And so we're very pleased that they've purchased 2 more. And I do know that it is on the agenda on Wednesday's town council meeting sponsored by Mr. Lettieri, to see if there's a possibility that the town council could afford us 2 more sets of Chromebooks.
How much is in a set, John?
There are 29 in a set with the cart. That's right, you get the cart moves, and people may say, geez, what do you need the cart for? The cart, it's a power source, so you put them in the cart. They're charging all the time when they're in that cart, and you can move them right around into the classrooms. So the goal, as we talked about at the last school committee, is to get 2 per grade. So at this time, we're now halfway there. We've got 4 carts, and if we can pick up 2 more from the town council, that would be wonderful. But that is I do know that is on the agenda, and my assumption is it will probably be referred to committee, and then at that time, we'll go in and talk with committee. So,
But since it's less than $10,000, perhaps it doesn't need to go to...
well, they're 10,000 each, so it would be 20 total. So
We're hopeful that...
This is your meeting.
We're just appreciative of any dollar that we may be able to obtain. And we have no problem going to those meetings to show the power of that tool.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We had jumped past the school building.
Yes.
Are we on schedule?
We are on schedule. Yes, we are. As a matter of fact, we're on schedule for the December 31st for the foundation to be completed. And we're actually, according to Gilbane, we're probably a little ahead of schedule on that. So we'll keep that going because, the weather is always, it's always tricky. What's interesting is that this is the trickiest part because you want to get that foundation down. But then they've said, in my conversations with Gilbane, they've said after that, when you get the steel and all that, they said snow is actually a blessing for us. I can't figure out all of those areas of why, but maybe in that type of environment, in the construction or the hardening of the ground once it's complete, maybe that is. But they're moving. They are moving well, and they're doing great work out there. So
It's also, in addition to being on schedule, it's on budget.
yes. That's very key. That is a key piece. So, if you don't have more questions, I'll go on to personnel.
Before you start with personnel, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gill for personnel first.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
We have a resignation from Susan Bolster, who's been on the Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational School Committee. And I'll just read you her resignation. After much consideration and heartfelt soul-searching, I've decided to resign from my position on the Regional School Committee effective January 1st, 2015. The 6 years I've spent on the committee have been very rewarding, but my life has gone through some changes in the recent past. personal and work obligations are beginning to overshadow my commitment to the committee, and I find I can no longer devote the amount of time necessary to be an effective board member. I regret any upheaval or inconvenience my resignation may cause. I am hopeful that, for the committee, I am hopeful that the length of my notice will aid the seamless transition for a new board member. I've greatly enjoyed collaborating with my fellow board members over the past 6 years, and I'm proud of the positive impact that we've had on the lives of the hundreds of children, and I hold you all in the best regard. This was a CC of a letter that went to the Regional School Committee. Susan not only served very, very well and on the Regional School Committee for 6 years, she was also a select woman prior to the establishment of the Town Council. A lifelong Winthrop resident, very well-respected family, and I want to thank Susan for her dedication and devotion to the Northeast Regional School. That brings up the process of filling the vacancy, and the process of filling the vacancy, according to our charter, requires that the council and the school committee have a joint meeting at which they elect a replacement person. I advertised it on the website for the last 3 weeks, and I have received 2 applications. I'm requesting that at our next council meeting, not this week, on the 18th, that we take the first section of that council meeting and have a joint meeting of the school committee and the council. Prior to that, I will circulate to the chairman the copies of the applications with the resumes, and at that point, we will choose one of the 2. Again, Susan, thank you for your dedication and your contributions to the Northeast Regional School. I know it holds a very, very great place in your heart. So, if there's no objection, I will schedule a joint meeting for 7 o'clock on November 18th in the Harbor Room.
I will ask for a special school committee meeting on that evening, with the one agenda item being to meet with the town council to resolve this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, under...
Just one other thing.
Yes.
That's for the unexpired term, so it'll expire, it'll be 3 years left on a 4-year term. Thank you.
So, under the appointments, as you know, that we've had a committee that's been working with, looking for a curriculum director for Winthrop Public Schools. The committee had sent 2 folks on to be finalists. This past week, the committee went to both site visits, one in Saugus and one in Charlestown. We met with both candidates, and then we interviewed the final candidates on Wednesday and Thursday. At which Friday, I am pleased to say that we did make a offer. We've made a selection to one of the candidates who will be meeting us this week to go to the next stage of negotiations for that position. But currently, they've given a verbal commitment of a yes, and that gentleman is Mr. Frank Woods from Saugus. Frank is currently the STEM director of Saugus Public Schools, 6 through 12 STEM director. As they stated, they were basically a K through 12, but the title was 6 through 12. And in Saugus was currently also serving as the assistant principal at the time of the middle school. So we look forward to having Mr. Woods join us if all things work well on that. Under resignations, I do have 2 resignations that have come in, and I will be brief with this, but dear Mr. Messere, it is with regret that I must inform you of my resignation. My husband has accepted a position in New York with a start date of December 1st. I would like to give Winthrop as much time as possible to find my replacement and aid in transitioning the new teacher into my role. I'm able to continue working through the first few weeks of December. I'm grateful for all the opportunities Winthrop has provided me. I have enjoyed my position here tremendously and am sad to be leading such a wonderful group of people. Please let me know if there's any way I can assist you during my remaining time here. Thank you for your understanding. Ms. Lunda Romeo. She was the moderate special needs teacher at the Arthur T. Cummings School. I will say that I've had the pleasure of working with Lunda for 4 years now, and here again, it's one of these where things do change, and when you can change and you move into different parts of the country and stuff, this is a geographical change, and it's difficult.
Yes, I'd also say I've worked with Linda at the middle school, and there isn't a finer teacher and dedicated teacher, and also a teacher that's so sensitive to the needs of some very special children. And she has done a wonderful job for us, and I only wish her and her family the very, very best in their new location.
I do have a letter from Mr. Witten of the high school, who recently came on board this year and has decided to resign as Spanish teacher from Winthrop High School. He will leave the job and honor his 60 days from this date of when released. And thank you for the opportunity to serve as educator in Winthrop. And, my only connection with Mr. Witten is, of course, I meet with every teacher when they first come in, and had the opportunity to touch base with him. I saw him working in some classes at times, but I'm sad to say that we will be looking for a Spanish teacher in this area as well, but these things happen, so.
We will be doing exit interviews,
Yes.
as we always do.
Yes, we will have that taken care of. In as regard to retirements, there are none. Postings, we have special education that we have posted, and we will, of course, before the next meeting, be posting Spanish. And I think that I may also be taking a look at doing a posting I may have to reach out to the Globe on a posting, because I'm not sure when we had to post for the Spanish the last time, we got a couple of candidates in, but we didn't get a lot, so I think I need to reach out on a broader spectacle here to make sure that we're getting what we need. I have no leave of absences. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the superintendent? Next item is the warrant. We have a warrant number SVW 15-7 in the amount of $159,066.06. Motion by Town Council President Gill,
Second.
second by Ms. Sullivan. Any questions or comments about the warrant? We will vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you. Next is the payroll warrant. It is dated September 24th, 2014, for the amount of $620,965.02.
Motion.
Motion by Vice Chairman Perrin, second by Ms. Sullivan. Comments, questions about the payroll warrant? We will vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I abstain. Next item is the use of buildings. We have two requests for the use of buildings: the high school boys basketball fundraiser game and the Winthrop Youth soccer practices. First at the high school gymnasium, the second at the Arthur T. Cummings Gymnasium.
Motion to take both together?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Thank you, Mr. Perrin. Questions, comments? All in favor?
Both accompanied by payment?
Both are accompanied by payment.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Winthrop Youth Soccer is accompanied by payment. The high school boys basketball is accompanied with a purchase order.
Yeah, I saw that, right. Thank you.
Oh, no, they're a check.
Both the checks.
Both checks.
Both are checks.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Questions? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It seems I'm going to abstain on this. Thank you. Background checks, we're still working on background checks. Next is the overnight travel request to Falmouth for the high school boys basketball. Anyone wish to speak on this? Ms. Hames, do you wish to speak on this?
I don't know if you want to add with the approval of the overnight travel to also approve the fundraiser game, because you just approved the building request, but he had the fundraiser request attached to his building request.
Yes, I'm sorry, I
So
assumed that we were
It's the same thing,
approving
it's
the whole
both
thing.
boys basketball, so.
We were approving the whole thing at once. We wouldn't approve the use of it if we weren't going to approve the actual function itself. I'm
Okay.
sorry. If
Just wanna
everybody
make
on the
sure.
committee wishes, we will take a separate vote. If not, it's just, we were approving both at the same
Okay,
time. Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you
Just
for
wanna make
asking
sure.
that. If no one wishes to speak on the boys' basketball, I guess we will put that off until we have more information on it? Someone want to make a motion on it?
I'm just looking to read it again. I know I saw it.
There was a letter request.
I'm trying to get to it in my...
What's the date of it?
I have
The
it.
date of
December 6th and 7th, scrimmage against Falmouth High School.
Okay.
How many chaperones?
So that would be
We
the
don't
only
know.
question. Yeah, it's the chaperones.
And what's the mode of transportation?
Perhaps Mr. DiMarino would be able to fill us in with a few more details before we make
Sure,
a
we
motion
can
on
make sure
this.
that happens. Can have them here on the 17th.
That'd be great.
Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Sharkey.
Yes, I was just wondering if maybe we need to review with our coaches through our athletic director about the things that are needed. This is like the second time that it's happened that we haven't gotten enough information, so that maybe if we just review with them, you know, it'll simplify it for them as well as allowing us to, you know, vote on it as soon as they need it. You know, so maybe we need to
I think
do
Russell's gonna
that,
say the same thing.
you know.
Ms.
I
Sullivan.
don't know if this exists, but just like another request, is there an overnight event request form?
We were just discussing that
Yeah.
and saying we should have a
Should
form.
be.
Because then it
So
would make
Yeah.
that's what
it
we'll do. We'll put together one and then have, I guess we would have policy approve it. But that would probably work best.
Yeah, I
We
think
can
so.
just have everybody get,
Could
what's
list
the
the
questions that we want answered,
Mhm.
and boom,
Right.
make it simple.
We don't want to not give people enough time to plan. But we also
Exactly.
don't want to.
I mean, this particular trip is a traditional trip that they do
Right.
every year because the coach of Falmouth High is a former Winthrop resident,
Yeah.
Paul Lundberg. But we still don't have any information here, as you're correct, of who's chaperoning, where they're staying, all of those things.
He's asking us to approve it, and
Right, so we
we're
need
not
that.
comfortable doing that without further
Mhm.
information. Next is public comment. Ms. Chavez.
Well, since the superintendent didn't mention it, the boys did make the top 20 this morning in the Boston Globe
Oh, I did not.
for football,
Oh, did they? I didn't.
and they also remain on the bus, which is a positive thing.
Good.
And they're playing Trident, as you said, who was 6-2, so that's better than playing Winfield. It was 8-0. Anyways, tonight's my third night listening to the MCAS. I guess for the first time in a few years, people have really come up with some solutions, rather than just giving us a lot of percentage points. Mr. Harity, I think, did an excellent job, as did Mrs. Pearson tonight. Mrs. Bellistock did a good job, but I'm not sure what her action plan is.
Mhm.
Even rereading, you know, what she presented. I'm sure she has one, I just am not sure what it is. I just want to congratulate them. I think they all did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you,
They did
Ms.
too.
Chavez. Next is public relations. Mrs. Sharkey. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sharkey? I don't think I understand.
I don't have any.
The face on Mr. Perrin.
Mr. Perrin.
Nothing for me.
Mr. Gill, I don't know whose
Nothing.
purview this would fall under. I suspect it's not the school committee, perhaps it could be the town council, but Halloween being on Friday night this year was a wonderful thing.
So you'd like the town council to change Halloween to
I
Friday
would
night?
like the town council to make the town of Winthrop's Halloween the last Friday of October.
Would you like
Yes.
us to dictate the weather as well?
If you could, because we missed a huge storm by one day this year.
Next
So you
year
did a
we got
good job this
Saturday.
year.
Yeah, it's true. It's one.
Next year will be Saturday.
Next year will be Saturday, but
You just never wanted on a school night? Is that
I never wanted
a
a school.
concern?
It is a children's event. It is when they are out, sometimes late. Sometimes they may eat too much candy, and to have to get them out of bed early the next day could be problematic.
This is also
So
true for
what you're saying
adults.
is you didn't have much control over your children?
Okay, so could you help me out here?
Even though I said no, I just want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and Tom
Tom,
Hankard at the Webster
Credit union, yeah.
for putting it together. The kids had just a marvelous, marvelous time. I enjoy seeing it, but I want to thank them for doing that every
Great
year
job.
for our children.
Mr. Superintendent.
I have two public relations things.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to
Okay,
go down.
go
I
that
thought
way.
you wanted to speak of something.
Nope.
I was going to speak to Tom at the credit union, but I guess Mary Alice.
Oh, sorry about that,
I'm
Peter.
kidding.
Sorry.
Ms. Sullivan.
I know that the Gorman Fort Banks PTO is putting on paint night at the yacht club, the Pleasant Park Yacht Club, thank you, on this coming Friday, and I know there are tickets still available. It's a very fun event if anybody,
It's
What?
not a Pleasant Park, it's Winthrop Yacht Club.
oh, Winthrop Yacht Club?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
But there are tickets still available for that. It is really fun, adult-only event. And I believe their next PTO meeting is Wednesday, the 12th, usually at 6:30. And just to speak to what Mrs. Pearson was saying about parent involvement, it's a great place to start to get involved and at the PTO meetings and learn a lot of information. So I just want to plug that.
Thank you, and I don't think anyone should ever feel intimidated or hesitant to go to a PTO meeting.
Right.
I have been to many and not spoken a word. Nobody asks me to run for vice president, but I get a lot of information. And so I don't think you should not go because you think you might be elected vice president. You'll just get a lot of information, as you said, Ms. Sullivan.
Can I just repeat back one thing?
Certainly.
I just wanted to mention the wonderful tribute to Mayor Menino that was today
Yes.
for his funeral, and the wonderful things that was said about the legacy that he left behind, and the way he managed himself as the manager of the city of Boston for 20 years. It was really a wonderful, wonderful tribute to him and to his family. And our condolences go out to the Menoses. Thank you.
Mrs. Coleman?
So I have two pieces. One, unfortunately, our girls volleyball did not win tonight.
Oh.
They lost 3-1. However, what I did not realize was that our cheerleaders, our high school cheerleaders, won first place this past weekend in the competition.
That's
So
excellent.
congratulations to our cheerleaders.
Was that a state championship?
Not a state, just a competition, division round.
Very good. Ms. Chavez, did you want to say something, but yes or no?
Monday.
Yes.
Okay. If there's no objection, we're going to go back to public comment. No objection.
I do
Go ahead.
apologize. As far as parent involvement is concerned, I've been on the site council now at the Cummings and the Gorman School for many years, and I don't know what the solution is. Mrs. Pearson has gone out of her way, as did Ms. Finocchio, to try and get the parents to come in and help out, to come in and participate, to come in and just see what's going on. Nothing seems to work. So if anybody out there has any thoughts, please, just get in touch with the building principals or even somebody in the school committee if you feel more comfortable doing that. I don't know what the solution is, I really don't. And as Mr. Squamrow had said earlier, as far as this Go Math is concerned, I went to many nights of that, and I also was tutored by Meredith Cavell. And just to see what these people do, it's worth your while to go. If you have that interest in your kids, you've got your partake.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to say before we move to the next item? The next item is adjournment. Is there a motion? Motion by Ms. Sullivan, second by Mrs. Sharkey. Discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it's unanimous. We're adjourned.